Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world where your backyard garden floats, your commute involves a canoe, and your neighbors trade compost secrets louder than gossip. We're drifting into the misty canals of the Aztec Empire, specifically into the chinampas, or floating gardens, that fed an entire civilization without anyone getting soggy socks. You're standing barefoot in the marshy edges of Lake Texcoco, sometime around the 14th century. The air is thick with humidity. Dragonflies buzz lazily above the surface, and somewhere nearby, someone is cursing because their fishing net just caught more algae than fish. The ground beneath you isn't exactly ground. It squelches, wobbles, and smells faintly of sweet decay. You're going to build a farm here, and no, there's no solid land in sight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint out over the lake. There are little islands floating just off the edge of the water, patches of green so neatly squared off, they look suspiciously human-made. Which they are. These are chinampas, and you'll be building one soon enough. But first, let's back up. You've just arrived in the Valley of Mexico, a high-altitude basin ringed by volcanoes and blessed with 5 lakes. Lake Texcoco is the biggest, and it's, let's say, temperamental. It floods. A lot. And then it dries up. Also a lot. You're not dealing with gentle, well-behaved freshwater here. This is brackish, unpredictable swamp soup with attitude. The Mexica people, yes, those are your people before the Spanish rebranded you as Aztecs, migrated here after a long weird trek involving prophetic birds, cacti, and, depending who you ask, at least one divine temper tantrum. When you first arrive, most other tribes have already claimed the decent real estate. You get the leftovers, soggy, marshy, unlivable lake edge. Perfect. You pitch a few reed huts and stare bleakly at the mud. Nothing grows here without drowning. But necessity is a stubborn teacher. You watch birds nesting in floating debris. Notice how vegetation clusters on shallow shelves. And then it hits you. Why not build your farmland on the water like the birds do? Fast forward a few decades, and you've gone from squatter to innovator. The island city of Tenochtitlan is rising around you like a mirage. Stone temples, marketplaces, causeways that stretch like arms over the lake. And out in the surrounding waters, neat rows of chinampas line the surface like green patchwork quilts. You paddle past hundreds of them, each one carefully crafted, anchored, and more fertile than any dry field could ever be. Here's the thing. The Valley of Mexico isn't naturally rich in farmland, but the Aztecs didn't let geography win. They outsmarted it. Historians still argue whether chinampas were invented here or borrowed from earlier civilizations like the Xochimilcas. But you and your neighbors refine the practice until it becomes one of the most efficient agricultural systems on Earth. Mainstream history may focus on the blood and feathers of Aztec rituals, but tonight we focus on mud, willows, and compost. You're not here to fight. You're here to farm, quietly, cleverly, and with as little foot moisture as possible. Now, before we move on, a fun little fringe fact. The name Tenochtitlan possibly means place of the prickly pear cactus on stone, which is exactly what the mythical eagle was sitting on when your ancestors decided, yep, this is home now. Romantic, right? Except that cactus was growing out of a rock in the middle of a swamp. Cue the collective sigh of thousands of future farmers. So, here you are, in a land no one else wanted, turning water into vegetables, swamp into civilization. The sun is rising over Lake Texcoco, throwing golden mist across the water. And you've got a canoe, a pile of reeds, and big squishy plans. You wake up to the sound of gentle splashing, canoes heading out early. their wooden hulls cutting through the still water like butter on a hot camal. You stretch, blink away the morning haze, and realize once again that your house is technically not on land. Not quite. You're living on a spongy patch of ground near the shoreline, and even this little patch floods every time the lake gets moody. Which is often. The Valley of Mexico is like nature's practical joke. 5 lakes, not much dry land, and a climate that can't decide if it's the tropics or a highland. There are dry seasons that bake the mud into concrete, and wet seasons that leave you wondering if your cooking fire is now a fish pond. But you and your people, you're stubborn. You don't move. You adapt. You paddle through a winding channel between chinampas and look around. These floating gardens didn't exist a generation ago. They were born out of sheer necessity. With most of the good arable land already snatched up by other city-states, the Aztecs, your people, had to get creative. And let's be honest, there's nothing quite like desperation to make someone a genius. Picture it. It's the early 1300s. You've been driven out of your last home. The basin you settle in is mostly swamp. You try digging up land, but the water just keeps oozing back in, like a rude houseguest who doesn't know when to leave. You could pack up and move on again, sure, but instead, you look at the swamp and think, fine, I'll build on you. Historians still argue whether this ingenious solution, chinampas, was entirely Aztec in origin, or borrowed from earlier peoples like the Teotihuacanos or the Toltecs. But one thing's certain, the Aztecs took the concept and absolutely ran with it, or rather, paddled with it. So how do you farm on water? Not with flower pots, that's for sure. First, you identify the shallows, those magical places where the lake is just deep enough to move a canoe through, but not so deep that you'll need diving gear. Then you gather reeds, branches, and whatever plant debris you can scrounge. If it floats, it's useful. If it smells a little funny, even better, it'll be compost in a week. You start by laying long stakes into the lake bed, usually made from fast-growing trees like ahueyo, it's the Mexican willow. These aren't just stakes. They'll eventually take root and grow into anchor trees, holding the entire structure together. Think of them as the rebar of ancient Mesoamerica. Next comes the weaving. Reeds, branches, and more reeds, layered like some kind of oversized basket. Then comes the mud. You scoop it up from the bottom of the lake and slap it onto the structure like frosting on a very soggy cake. It's messy. It's smelly. You will absolutely fall in a few times. But it works. Over time, the mud solidifies. Sort of. It's never truly solid. Just solid enough. You step carefully, feeling the slight bounce under your feet. It's like walking on a very well-behaved trampoline. Eventually, the chinampa becomes firm enough to support crops. You're still surrounded by water, but your feet stay dry. Mostly. And now that you've got your very first chinampa, the land problem is solved. Every time you need more farmland, you just build another one. It's expandable, scalable, and surprisingly sustainable. 3 things your average modern tech startup can only dream of. Here's a quirky bit. Some chinampas were even built in neat geometric grids that could be seen from the hills above. Aerial landscaping before drones were a thing. Not bad for folks using only wooden tools and canoes. But back to you. You're not just a farmer, you're a city builder. The expanding chinampa system does more than grow food. It becomes part of the urban infrastructure of Tenochtitlan. Canals double as streets. Gardens double as defenses. Even the emperor occasionally floats by, admiring the scenery from a jade-inlaid canoe, pretending not to notice that his servants are actually rowing frantically to keep up with schedule. Of course, not everyone's impressed. Some neighboring cities mocked your ancestors for settling in such a hopeless place. Why live in a swamp, they sneered. Joke's on them. You're pulling 3 harvests a year while they pray for rain. By now, you've realized something important. The land didn't need to be tamed. It needed to be persuaded. And chinampas, They're the perfect bribe. You're not conquering nature. You're making a very polite deal with it. Let me grow corn, and I won't drain your lake. A mainstream fact worth remembering: chinampas could produce up to 7 tons of crops per hectare each year. That's not just efficient, that's legendary, especially in a time without metal tools, tractors, or overpriced organic labels. You pass by your neighbor who's carefully pruning chili plants. He waves. You wave back. Both of you know that this place, this unlikely soggy paradise, isn't just farmland. It's proof that cleverness trumps terrain. And yes, your feet are still dry. For now. You drift gently through the still water in your canoe, nose full of the mingling scents of wet earth, sun-warmed reeds, and something leafy and fresh, maybe cilantro. You're paddling toward your own little piece of genius, the chinampa. Though people call them floating gardens, they're not technically floating. Sorry to burst that dreamy image. They're tethered down, rooted into the lake bed, and deceptively stable. But let's be honest. Floating but securely anchored, artificial raised bed island farms just doesn't have the same ring. Still, from the perspective of a heron flying overhead, it does look like the land itself is skating across the surface of the lake, featherlight and magical. In reality, it's mud, sticks, decaying plant goo, and hours of very squishy labor. But it's your goo, and it's glorious. Let's walk carefully on the one you finished last week. You balance along the edge, feet squishing into the damp soil. Each chinampa is about 2.5 to 3 meters wide, maybe 30 meters long enough for your daily workout just weeding one row. The shape isn't random. It's designed for efficiency. Narrow enough that you can reach across from a canal in a canoe and harvest crops without ever setting foot on the soil. Your ancestors thought of everything, especially how to avoid getting their fancy cotton sandals muddy. The base is a sandwich of organic materials. You start with woven reeds on the bottom, then pile up layers of lake mud and decomposing vegetation. It's like compost lasagna. Every so often you stick willow branches around the edges, and over time they grow into living fences. Not only do they keep your precious soil in place, they provide shade, firewood, and a great place to hang out if you want to look mysteriously broody while holding a squash. You kneel beside your row of beans and brush aside a curious snail. The soil is rich, dark, and absurdly fertile. Why? Because it's constantly replenished by the lake. The mud you scoop up to rebuild your chinampa after a storm? It's loaded with nutrients. Plus, you're surrounded by water, so irrigation is a non-issue. You just lean over with a gourd scoop, and voila, instant hydration. Historians still argue whether chinampas were purely an Aztec innovation or adapted from Xochimilca techniques, who were already doing something similar a few centuries earlier. But the Aztecs definitely industrialized the process on a scale that makes your plot feel like a backyard tomato box in comparison. By the height of the empire, it's estimated that there were as many as 36,000 acres of chinampas surrounding Tenochtitlan. That's a lot of vegetables. And this wasn't subsistence farming. It was big business. Produce from chinampas fed not just farmers and their families, but the bustling markets of the capital, with surplus carried off to tribute centers and regional trade hubs. Still, there's a personal rhythm to this work. You paddle out in the morning mist, a basket tucked beside you, maybe a tottering mug of that blessed chocolatl, bitter and thick. You harvest maize, amaranth, chilies, and squash, sometimes all from a single plot. Your chinampa isn't just a monocrop machine, it's an ecosystem. Here's a fringe tidbit to make you smirk. Some chinampas doubled as graveyards for small pets. Yep. The soft, damp soil was ideal for burying your late and lamented duck or hairless dog. It's a little bit farm, a little bit final resting place. Plant some marigolds, and you've got yourself a seasonal day of the dead set up ready to go. And don't think you're out here all alone. The canals are buzzing with activity. Fishermen pass by, gently lowering their weighted nets. Traders paddle along with boats filled with herbs, flowers, even live birds in cages, because why not sell parrot feathers and tomatoes from the same canoe? The Chinampa life is deeply communal. If your neighbor's canal overflows, you help him reinforce it with woven reed mats and mud walls. If your garden's struggling with fungus, the old lady 2 plots over will lend you her mysterious and frankly terrifying smelling fermented toad water spray. You don't ask what's in it. It works. But don't be fooled. These aren't perfect floating utopias. They need constant maintenance. Left alone for a few seasons, a Chinampa can sag, drift, or even collapse into the water like a tired souffle. That's why you spend a few hours every week reinforcing the banks, restacking your compost layers, and encouraging your willow borders to keep doing their thing. And yet, even with the constant tinkering, this whole system runs smoother than a royal canoe. There are no metal tools, no chemical fertilizers, no pumps or hoses, just mud, brains, and a whole lot of elbow grease. It's sustainable farming before that became a buzzword. And it's oddly soothing. As you squat by your garden bed, planting new rows of tiny tomato seedlings, a dragonfly lands on your arm. The water reflects the golden haze of the midday sun, and the distant city hums softly. Stone temples rising in the distance, market stalls bustling. But here, in your Chinampa, it's calm. You press your fingers into the warm soil, feel the heartbeat of the lake beneath you. You're not just farming. You're living inside an invention so efficient, so ecologically brilliant, that even modern agronomists still marvel at it. The Chinampa isn't just a piece of land, it's a relationship. One built on patience, observation, and an uncanny ability to make mud into magic. And if you get a little dirty along the way, well, that's just part of the charm. You stand up, stretching your arms to the sky, looking out over the water. The Chinampa system might seem like a series of unassuming little islands at first glance, but when you look closer, it's so much more. A careful, methodical, and surprisingly sustainable network that feeds thousands, even as it floats in the watery depths of Lake Texcoco. Let's step back for a moment. You've built this little patch of green, carefully layered and anchored with willows and reeds, but you're not done yet. No, your Chinampa isn't just a static patch of earth. It's a living, breathing ecosystem. You've got to keep this thing fed, hydrated, and, well, anchored. The Aztecs were masters at this delicate balance. Chinampas don't just sit there being all impressive. They need constant care and attention. Let one fall apart, and you risk losing an entire harvest. So, like any good farmer, you become part gardener, part engineer, part disaster prevention officer. You patch and maintain as you go, ensuring the Chinampa stays steady and ready for another season of crops. But how do you keep it from simply drifting away into the lake? You've got your willows, your reeds, your mud, but you also need an anchor. After all, this garden is floating over a massive, unpredictable lake, and if the lake has a temper, it's only a matter of time before it gets cranky. So, here's where things get fascinating. The Aztecs weren't just planting crops. They were building entire structures designed to survive floods, droughts, and other challenges of this swampy world. You don't just throw a few sticks into the water and call it a day. You need a serious engineering plan to keep this farm secure. At the core of every Chinampa is a system of stakes, tall poles driven deep into the lake bed, anchoring the whole thing in place. These stakes aren't just for show. They're a critical part of making sure the Chinampa doesn't float away like an oversized lily pad. Think of them like the stilts of a floating house, except instead of wood beams, you're working with flexible, lightweight materials like reed bundles and a little bit of Aztec ingenuity. These stakes, often made from the same willow trees used to line the edge of the Chinampa, have roots that over time sink deeply into the soft lake bed. As the willows grow, their roots form a natural lattice, connecting your chinampa to the earth beneath the water, giving it stability and strength. And just in case the water gets really unruly, you've got to build carefully. A little tilt to the left, and your crops are under a foot of water. A little tilt to the right, and they're exposed to the baking sun. It's a delicate game of balance. It's funny how such an ancient system of farming looks so modern when you think about it. The Aztecs didn't have bulldozers, nor did they hire architects to design their floating farms. They had nature as their guide. And when nature said, "Hey, you need stability," they answered with willows and reed walls. A perfect example of sustainable engineering that didn't involve concrete or steel. Here's a quirky tidbit. The stakes used to anchor the chinampas could actually double as a kind of natural irrigation system. As the plants grew, their roots intertwined with the stakes, creating a natural filtration system for the water. In effect, the chinampas acted as small floating wetlands, helping to filter the water and keep the lake's ecosystem healthy. But let's not forget the bigger picture. Tenochtitlan is rising up around you, with its grand temples, its towering pyramids, and its bustling markets. The chinampas are more than just a way of growing food. They're the lifeblood of the city. Without them, the Aztecs wouldn't be able to feed the tens of thousands who live here. Every chinampa represents a victory over the challenges of the environment, a triumph of human ingenuity that turned a swamp into a thriving metropolis. But just when you think you've got everything figured out, nature throws you a curveball. The water's level in Lake Texcoco isn't always predictable. You've learned to read the signs, the way the mud squelches underfoot in the rainy season, the way the wind changes direction when a flood is coming. But there are still those days when everything feels a little too uncertain. The wind picks up, the rain falls in sheets, and the water begins to creep higher than you'd like. What happens then? Simple. You rebuild. You adjust. You learn to work with the water rather than against it. It's that kind of flexibility that allows the chinampas to stand the test of time. Sure, there are floods, droughts, and the occasional volcanic eruption, but you work with it. You reinforce your chinampas with additional layers of reeds. You extend your anchoring poles. You build them higher if you need to. And if a chinampa does get damaged, you can always build another one. The system is adaptable, so long as you're willing to get your hands dirty and put in the effort. At the same time, chinampas aren't just for farming. They become community hubs, places where farmers share news, trade crops, and offer advice to one another. The canals, which once served as transport routes, are now highways of social activity. You wave at your neighbors as they paddle by. Maybe they're carrying bundles of beans. Maybe they're just out for a leisurely row. And speaking of leisure, there's also time to appreciate the beauty of it all. It's easy to get caught up in the daily grind of planting and harvesting, but when you step back and look at the scene around you, it's almost magical. The floating gardens, the canals, the reflections of the sun setting behind the distant mountains. It's more than just farming. It's a lifestyle, a way of living in harmony with the environment. And as you watch the sun dip below the horizon, you realize that, for all the hard work and ingenuity involved, this is a good place to be. The next morning, as the mist curls low over the water and your canoe glides like a whisper through the canal, you're headed towards something slightly less glamorous, but absolutely essential: mud. Yes, glorious, gloppy lake bottom mud. Every few weeks, you or the apprentice you're mentoring, if you're lucky, set out to dredge up the nutrient-rich sediment from beneath the chinampa canals. It's cold. It's squishy. It gets under your fingernails and into places you don't want to think about. But this ooze is the secret sauce, the black gold of Mesoamerica. You lower your wide, flat basket, woven from reeds and patched with whatever you found floating last week, into the water, scooping up silt by the bucket load. The mud is thick with decomposing plant matter and fishy minerals, all broken down into the richest natural compost money can't buy. And you're not alone. All along the canal banks, other farmers are doing the same, hauling mud, hauling dreams. As you reach your chinampa's edge, you tip your load gently onto the surface, spreading it with a kind of reverence. You're not just building a garden, you're renewing it, feeding it. The layer you spread today will support the seedlings that feed your family next month and your city next year. It's slow work, but in the long run, it beats standing in line at the marketplace trying to haggle over withered squash. Historians still argue whether this dredging routine was mandated by central Aztec authorities. Some think there may have been seasonal rotations and quotas, especially in areas close to Tenochtitlan. Others believe it was more of a keep your own garden alive or starve policy. Either way, it worked. And speaking of Tenochtitlan, don't forget who's watching. You're part of a system now, a well-oiled, somewhat muddy cog in the economic engine of the empire. Your vegetables aren't just for your stew pot. They're part of the tribute system. Some weeks, your harvest is bundled up and sent downriver to feed the priesthood or the military garrisons, or occasionally, the emperor's weirdly picky pet jaguar. The empire expects, and you deliver. But today's not about tribute. Today is about rotation. You trudge to the far end of your chinampa, where last season's tomatoes are just clinging to life. Time to pull them up. You yank gently. Roots, stalks, the last droopy fruit. The soil is exhausted here, and you know it. It's time to let it rest. Instead of replanting immediately, you'll do what your mother did, and her grandmother before her. You cover the bed with lakeweeds, water hyacinth, duckweed, and that one plant you secretly call Smelly Susan. As they decay, they return nutrients to the soil, while their thick, fibrous stems help bind it together. The smell is robust, but the method is sound. Here's a quirky tidbit. Aztec farmers believed that singing to your chinampas, especially during replanting, encouraged good growth. They had specific songs for maize, songs for beans, even a cheeky one about chili peppers that you're definitely not singing in front of your elders. Whether it worked or not, who's to say? But it made the work a little lighter. You notice a visitor perched on the edge of your willow fence, a heron, long-legged and wise-looking, standing utterly still. It's your unofficial mascot. Last year, a frog colony made your chinampa its headquarters, and the resulting nightly choir kept you awake for weeks. Nature, as always, sees you as both caretaker and landlord. The maintenance isn't always glamorous. The canals silt up over time, slowing water flow and causing stinkier than usual puddles. You organize with your neighbors for a communal cleaning day, which sounds lovely until you're knee-deep in sludge while someone upstream is singing off-key. But it's all part of the rhythm. Chinampas breathe. They swell in the rainy season, shrink in the dry. They erode and rebuild. You learn their moods like you would a friend's, where the soil tends to crack, which corner attracts beetles when the willows need trimming. You might call it intuitive gardening. Your cousin calls it plant whispering. Either way, the results speak for themselves. The crops love it. Maize grows tall and strong, its leaves rustling like gossip in the wind. Beans climb up stalks like they're in a race to the sun. Squash sprawls across the damp earth, giving the chinampa a satisfyingly overgrown look. This is no prissy English garden. It's a jungle of productivity, a tangle of food. And you're the quiet conductor of this muddy orchestra. Modern agronomists still marvel at the productivity of chinampas. Some studies suggest they could produce 7 harvests a year on a single plot, thanks to the continuous fertility and ideal microclimate. That's right. You're running an ancient permaculture system that outpaces most contemporary farms, all without a single fossil fuel. Sure, you're tired. You've got calluses that could cut glass and a permanent patch of mud on your tunic. But as you sit down under the shade of your willow tree, sipping at a calabash of cool maize gruel, you realize this floating farm isn't just a way to grow food. It's a philosophy. One rooted in patience, observation, and the quiet reward of watching something thrive. You lean back, stretch out your legs, and squint at the sky. The heron's still there. The plants are green and humming. The mud is thick, rich, and weirdly comforting. And you? You didn't just keep your feet dry. You built something enduring. You blink against the rising sun as it glimmers off the canal's surface, golden and gentle, like liquid fire spread thin. It's another day on the Chinampa, but this time we're heading back to the beginning. Not just your morning, but the origins of the entire system. Because while you're already knee-deep in muck and maze, someone had to dream this floating miracle up in the first place. So who and how? Well, that's where the water gets murky. Historians still argue whether Chinampas began with the Aztecs or earlier civilizations like the Xochimilca, who lived around Lake Xochimilco centuries before the Mexica even arrived. Some say the Aztecs just perfected what others started. Others claim the Mexica innovated on a grand scale, transforming a modest swamp farming technique into a full-blown city-sustaining supergrid. Either way, you owe a nod of gratitude to those early wet-footed pioneers who first looked at a swamp and said, "Yeah, I'll grow corn here." Picture it. A time before Tenochtitlan, before temples pierced the clouds. Just lowland communities slogging through reeds and mosquitoes, trying to figure out how to grow a decent squash without drowning it. It likely began with modest attempts. Maybe someone laid down a mat of lake reeds, tossed some dirt on top, and planted a few beans. Then, success. Maybe not much, but enough to inspire a second attempt, a third. Before long, they were experimenting with staking edges, dredging canals, and weaving support structures. You can almost hear the conversations. Let's try using willow poles this time. What if we line the outside with woven mats? I'm not saying we have to name it after me, but... And from those patient experiments came the Chinampa system as you know it, layered, anchored, fed by the very lake it floats on. A dance of mud, reeds, and water. One of the most surprising facts? These ancient engineers worked without metal tools, wheels, or beasts of burden. No oxen dragging plows. No iron shovels gleaming in the sun. Just stone tools, human grit, and trial and error know-how passed down like bedtime stories. You, dear farmer, are the latest link in a long, muddy chain of invention. Now, let's talk layout. Because Chinampas weren't just thrown together willy-nilly like a toddler's first attempt at lasagna. No, this was methodical. Organized. Think wetland feng shui. Each Chinampa was generally rectangular, narrow enough for you to stand in the center and harvest both sides without wading in. Usually 30 meters long, maybe 2 to 4 meters wide, built in rows, separated by canals wide enough for a canoe to slip through, yet shallow enough that if you dropped a precious avocado, you could probably fish it out without losing your sandal. The layout created a checkerboard of earth and water, green rows separated by glittering silver lanes. It looked peaceful from above, or, let's be real, from the top of a nearby temple. But it was all business down here, and yet somehow it wasn't frantic. The system worked because it was in sync with the lake. The canals fed the crops, cooled the air, and allowed easy transportation. You could harvest, load up your canoe, and be selling your wares at the Tenochtitlan market by noon, if you paddled fast and remembered not to snack on your own chili peppers. Here's a fun little tidbit. Some Chinampa farmers used floating mats of azala, tiny aquatic ferns, to enrich the water. Azala fixes nitrogen and encourages fish, insects, and waterfowl, all of which contribute to fertilizing the Chinampa ecosystem. Basically, they had their own built-in aquatic compost crew. Move over, hydroponics. By now, your hands know what to do. Your feet move without thinking, avoiding the slippery patches, testing the edges. And your mind drifts, wondering what it must have been like to be that first farmer, watching a sapling root itself in floating earth, seeing the experiment become legacy. But you're not alone in your wonder. Modern scholars have been scratching their heads over how the Aztecs managed to scale this system so efficiently. Some believe a combination of community knowledge sharing and strict imperial oversight played a role. Others argue it was necessity that drove innovation. The city needed food, the swamps were there, and the people adapted like their lives depended on it, because they did. And there's still mystery. Archaeologists have found buried Chinampa systems beneath modern Mexico City, evidence of an even more extensive network than once thought. Historians still debate how far these floating farms stretched, how they were regulated, and whether they were partly ceremonial. Were some Chinampas reserved for temple offerings? Did certain nobles have designer gardens floating outside their estates? What's clear is that the Chinampa wasn't just a plot of land. It was a relationship, a long-term commitment between people and place. You didn't just grow food here, you belonged here. You tended not just crops, but culture. So as you walk your garden path, brushing against the tall stalks of amaranth and the fluted leaves of maguey, you're not just farming, you're embodying a philosophy, a way of coexisting with water, of shaping land without breaking it. A sudden breeze ripples through the willows, bending them gently, their roots clutching the edges of your Chinampa like loving hands. The water shushes against the reeds. The sun glints off a canoe far away, the paddle dipping rhythmically like a heartbeat. And just for a moment, you feel it. That ancient pulse, steady and slow, the rhythm of all who came before you. A system born not from conquest or force, but from patience, from mud, from observation. You're not just standing on floating earth. You're standing on the wisdom of centuries. By now, you're used to the gentle squish of damp earth beneath your feet. You don't even flinch when a frog leaps from the reeds like a soggy firework. Life on a Chinampa becomes routine, and yet, every so often, a new challenge floats in like a canoe carrying unwelcome guests. Pests, specifically floating pests, crawling ones, chewing, buzzing, leaf-devouring menaces. You've spent weeks coaxing your maze into standing tall, only to wake up one morning and find a battalion of aphids holding a leaf summit. So what do? Well, you don't reach for pesticides. That's not a thing here. You reach for the toads. Seriously, Aztec farmers, much like you, knew how to read the land, and that meant forming strategic partnerships with the local wildlife. Toads, frogs, dragonflies, and even certain birds were part of your pest control squad. You built the ecosystem, and in return, it helped balance itself out. Frogs ate the insects. Birds kept the beetle population down. And snakes, well, they helped too. Assuming you didn't scream and fall backward into the canal at the sight of one. We've all been there. You've also got tricks of your own. You know that planting marigolds around the Chinampa perimeter helps deter certain bugs. You rotate crops, not just for soil health, but to keep insect populations guessing. One season it's beans, the next it's chilies. The bugs can't keep up. Honestly, neither can you some days, but you pretend it's all part of the plan. And while you're out there shooing away beetles with a willow branch, you can't help but chuckle, because you're essentially part-time farmer, part-time bug wrangler, full-time mud enthusiast. Historians still argue whether Aztec Chinamperos were formally trained in agricultural science, or whether it was more of an oral tradition passed down through families. Some archaeologists believe there may have been organized schools for farming technique, possibly tied to temple districts. Others think it was the ultimate apprenticeship system. Learn by doing, and pray you don't accidentally weed the wrong plant. Now, let's talk water again. You've noticed something. The water level is dropping. It's the dry season. The lake has receded a little, and your canals look less like rivers and more like ambitious puddles. Time to think like an engineer. You grab your digging stick and head to the far end of your Chinampa, where a small feeder canal connects to a deeper trench. You carefully open a passage, allowing fresh water to flow in and replenish your drying moat. This self-regulating system keeps everything balanced. Too much water, and your roots drown. Too little, and the soil cracks open like overbaked cornbread. And it's not just about survival. The canal water also acts as thermal insulation. During chilly nights, the lake radiates heat back toward your crops, keeping them warmer than their inland cousins. It's like having a giant, watery blanket wrapped around your floating garden. Here's a quirky side note. Some chinamperos swore by sprinkling a layer of crushed chili powder around young plants, not to flavor them, but to deter nosy rodents. Whether it worked or just made your nose itch while planting is still debated. You take a moment now, resting on a smooth stone that's conveniently just the right height. You nibble on a tamale, steam warmed in your morning cooking fire, and gaze out over the orderly chaos of chinampas stretching toward the horizon. From up high, this might look like a watery grid, like a giant chessboard someone spilled a salad on. But down here, it's symphony. And you, mud-caked and slightly sunburned, are its composer. The community around you pulses with the same rhythm. You can hear your neighbor humming a harvest tune, punctuated by the thunk of squash being tossed into a canoe. Children paddle by, their little arms strong from a lifetime of rowing. An elder rows past slowly, offering you a quiet nod of approval. Or maybe it's just winded. Either way, you nod back. This is more than farming. It's a lifestyle, and it's not without prestige. Successful chinamperos earn status. You might be called upon to contribute to ceremonial feasts, to supply offerings to the temple, or to host seasonal gatherings on your particularly verdant patch of floating real estate. There's pride here. Identity. You don't just live on land, you shape it. And of course, every system needs rules. You recall the time your cousin tried to expand his chinampa a little too far into a neighbor's canal. Let's just say, after a brief argument and a few strongly worded gourd throws, the community elders stepped in. There are unspoken borders here, enforced more by social contracts than city guards. Everyone watches everyone else, not in a creepy way, but in that we all have to survive together kind of way. Still, you have your private corner, a shady patch beneath the willows where your herbs grow, epazote, hojasana, and a tiny sprig of wild mint you refuse to tell anyone about. It's your quiet victory, your secret tea stash. A duck glides past, utterly uninterested in your emotional moment. You smile anyway. Modern agronomists have tried to recreate chinampa systems, and many find them remarkably efficient. Some even call them a sustainable model for future urban agriculture. Floating farms in a megacity? Turns out, the past might be more forward-thinking than we realized. And you're part of that legacy every time you drag a basket of soil, or sing a planting song, or laugh as a butterfly lands on your nose mid-weeding. Because here, surrounded by water, willow, and quiet industry, you're not just growing food, you're growing history. The light this morning is filtered and soft, like the lake itself is taking a nap. You stretch your back, soar from yesterday's canal clearing, and ease into another day on your floating farm. But something's different. There's a buzz in the air, not from insects, but people. Word has spread that the tribute collectors are arriving. You wince a little. The tribute system. Being a chinampero under the Aztec Empire wasn't just about growing food for your own table. No, you also had quotas to meet. Crops and goods owed to the state, to temples, or to high-ranking nobles. It was a bit like being part of a CSA box, if the customers were intimidating warriors with very specific expectations and very large obsidian clubs. Tribute wasn't arbitrary, though. It was cataloged, organized. Your town had a quota. So many sacks of maize, so many chilies, so many bundles of flowers or reeds, sometimes fish, sometimes frogs, sometimes things you'd rather not think too hard about. If you had a specialty crop, say those white cucumbers that only grow near your chinampa, you could bet someone important had already noticed. Historians still argue whether the system was fair or exploitative. Some believe the rotating tribute schedule gave farmers time to breathe between collection cycles. Others say it placed enormous strain on smaller communities, especially in times of flood or blight. But one thing's certain, the tribute kept Tenochtitlan running. It fed the markets, supplied the palaces, and stocked the great feasting tables of priests and emperors alike. So, as you stack your baskets, top layer perfect, bottom layer slightly wilted, you do so with mixed emotions, pride in your harvest, resentment at the tax, and mild panic that you forgot to pack the amaranth bundles tight enough. Here's a quirky detail. Chinampa produce was so fresh and prized, some tribute runners would race to be first to the market, hoping to earn favors for early delivery. This turned into informal competitions, which turned into full-on canoe races. Imagine a flotilla of competitive veggie deliverymen sprinting down the canals, shouting, "Out of the way! Important turnips coming through." Your village has its own tribute team. You recognize the canoe captain, an older woman with arms like braided rope and a voice that could scare the rain away. She's supervising the loading of baskets with laser focus. You offer a wave. She nods back with exactly one eyebrow raised. You're not sure if that means thank you or next time, pack the chili straighter. But let's zoom out for a moment. Because tribute wasn't just about food. It was also about flowers. The Aztecs adored flowers, not just for ceremonies or offerings, but as a symbol of wealth, beauty, and spiritual nourishment. If your Chinampa grew bright marigolds, red hibiscus, or rare white blooms from deep water seeds, you might be considered a specialist. Your flowers could end up in temple garlands, in the emperor's garden, or pressed between the pages of a codex recording sacred rituals. There's a theory that some Chinampas were used only for flowers. No vegetables, no corn, just rows and rows of fragrant color. Imagine that, floating islands of perfume, tended by quietly humming gardeners who spoke to their blooms like old friends. You've never been invited to one, but you've paddled past. The scent alone could knock you into a dream. Speaking of dreams, you pause at your favorite corner of the Chinampa, a patch you've cultivated for flavor more than function. Today you pick some episodi for cooking and pause to admire the spiral growth of a tiny wild cucumber, curling its way around a reed pole like a lazy snake. It's moments like this that remind you why you stay. Because despite the quotas, despite the aching arms and soggy sandals, this work feeds more than the belly. It feeds identity, culture, continuity. You glance up as a priest's messenger steps ashore, dressed in cotton robes dyed with cochineal red. He carries a small list and a large feathered fan, which he uses to swat away gnats while inspecting the tribute stacks. "Nice peppers," he mutters. You beam. Was that a compliment? There's even speculation among scholars that certain Chinampas were state-designated model farms. Their techniques copied, their yield recorded, their guardians treated like semi-royalty. If you produced record-setting maize or particularly fragrant flowers, you might be summoned to a noble's estate to explain your secrets. You'd get a cup of pulque, maybe a warm meal, and 100 questions. And if you were unlucky, a suggestion that you start training your nephew to take over. Because they were about to conscript you into teaching full-time, still the honor would be real. People would nod when you walked through the market. Little kids might call you Chinampa Grandmaster, even if you still had to paddle home through mosquito soup. Back on your island, the sun now sits higher, shadows shrinking like shy cats. The tribute canoe launches, heavy with squash, herbs, and exactly 43 chilies. You counted twice. As it glides away, you feel a mix of relief and emptiness. That food won't feed your family, but it will feed your city. And somewhere someone will bite into a perfect tomato and wonder who grew it. The answer? You did. With mud, sweat, and just a little help from your frog army, you're starting to feel a rhythm now. The back and forth between work and rest, soil and seed, sun and shade. It's all becoming second nature. You know the hours of the day by the patterns of the water, the position of the sun, and the quiet hum of the community around you. But there's still one last piece to this farming puzzle: the challenge of the rainy season. It's almost like the sky has a mood swing. One day there's the delicate whisper of clouds forming. The next, the heavens open and unleash a torrential downpour that turns the lake into a maelstrom. And for you, living on a floating garden, well, it's like trying to balance a bowl of soup on a trampoline. You've prepared for this, though. You're not new to this. The canals, dug by generations before you, are channels of resilience. They're wide enough to allow the rush of water to pass through without flooding your crops. But there's an art to it. It's all about timing and control. You don't want your chinampa to float away, or worse, to become waterlogged. A balance must be struck. You've noticed a distinct difference in how the chinampa system works during the dry and wet seasons. The dry season is about tending to individual plants and ensuring they get just enough water without drowning. During the rainy season, however, it's about managing the water flow, making sure it doesn't wash away your entire harvest or damage your carefully built canals. Historians still argue about how much of this water management was a learned science or more of a mystical skill. Some believe the Aztecs learned it through direct observation of the natural environment, while others think that there were spiritual aspects to water control, perhaps involving offerings to water gods or prayers to Tlaloc, the rain god. Either way, you've become quite good at watching the sky and feeling the moisture in the air. And it's not just about protection. The rain, too, is a blessing. It's a renewal. The chinampas are like sponges, soaking in the rainfall, which helps feed the crops in the dry months. It's nature's own irrigation system, and you can almost hear it whispering to you as the water drips onto the reeds. You've learned the rhythms of rain, the first light drizzle, the heavy pour, the distant rumble of thunder. Each season has its own unique character. When the rains come, your crops seem to stretch toward the sky like they're reaching for the heavens themselves. It's a reminder that, though you're in charge of the land, the elements ultimately hold the power. You just get to play your part. The storm has passed, and you glance across the water, seeing your chinampa settle gently, as if it were breathing. The floodwaters may have risen, but your farm is still standing, as sturdy and resilient as you. It's moments like this that remind you how connected you are to this landscape, how the work you do here is an act of harmony with the land, not an imposition. And yet, while you tend to your crops with patience and care, there's a part of you that always wonders how much of this ancient system would still be relevant today. Could modern farmers find a way to incorporate these techniques into urban agriculture? Would we be able to manage our own land with the same mindfulness and respect that the Aztecs did? Historians and environmentalists continue to study these methods, eager to find sustainable solutions for modern-day food production. Still, you won't get ahead of yourself. You've got work to do. You pull up a few sprigs of amaranth, trim the wilting leaves from your chili plants, and keep your eyes on the water. Every day is a reminder of the delicate balance between the forces of nature and your own human ingenuity. And as the rain clouds drift away into the distance, you can't help but feel the soft weight of peace settle over you. After all, this work isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving in partnership with the world around you. The water, the soil, the plants, they're all part of the same system. It's been this way for centuries, and it will continue for centuries more. As the sky clears and the sun comes out again, warming the earth and your skin, you let out a slow breath, ready for the next cycle. Ready for the next chapter of chinampa life. The day is stretching long now. The morning's busy tasks have been ticked off, and you're on a quiet break, sitting with your back against the shade of the willows, watching the endless green ripple of the chinampas. The sun is beginning to dip, casting long, lazy shadows across the water. This time of day is when the chinampa feels like it's at peace with itself, everything in place, everything still. But as the evening comes closer, you begin to hear the distinct rhythmic sounds of paddles in the distance, the arrival of the night workers. The evening shift on the Chinampas isn't always about harvesting or planting, but it's just as vital. In fact, many Chinamperos preferred to work at night. Less heat, fewer insects, and the cooler air felt better on the skin. You stand and stretch, giving your muscles a break. It's time for something a little more leisurely. You join the others, paddling toward the canals where you'll spend a couple of hours tending to plants that need special attention. It's your favorite part of the day, a meditative routine. Chinamperos don't just live by sunlight and soil. Weeds, pests, and drying foliage can sneak up on you, especially when the days are filled with the hustle of everyday life. That's where the nighttime work comes in. It's like checking on an old friend, making sure they're doing okay when no one else is around to notice. There's something soothing about the evening on the Chinampa. As the sun sets, the air cools, and the sound of the water lapping against the sides of the canoe becomes a gentle, comforting background hum. The world around you softens. The bustling activity of the day dies down. You hear the faint calls of birds settling in for the night. Historians still argue over the role of night work in the Aztec economy. Some think it was a purely practical matter, born out of necessity. Others speculate that the stillness of night, when everything seemed more connected to the spiritual realm, might have made nighttime work feel like a sacred ritual. There's a theory that it was during these quiet hours that Aztecs engaged in more intimate agricultural prayers, hoping for good harvests and avoiding misfortune. Could there have been an almost magical element to working the Chinampas after dusk? Who knows? You don't think too hard about it. You just do the work, letting the nighttime pass slowly and peacefully. You pull your canoe toward a patch of squash and check for any ripe fruit. You've noticed that certain plants seem to thrive in the cooler evening hours, growing larger and more robust when tended to at twilight. As you carefully cut away a few overly ripe gourds, you think about the way ancient farmers must have considered the best times to plant, harvest, and maintain their crops, not just for practical reasons, but for celestial ones too. The stars above might have been as important as the water below. The quiet of the water, broken only by the soft splash of your oar, feels like a balm to the soul. You glance up at the night sky, where a scattering of stars is just beginning to shine. Here, on your floating island, the world feels far away. You're not concerned with wars, with the demands of the great city, with anything beyond this peaceful, floating haven. Your life is here, bound to the rhythm of the earth and water. In some ways, it's a world that has always been and will always be. The fireflies begin their dance and you chuckle, remembering the old story your grandmother used to tell about firefly spirits. According to her, the tiny glowing creatures were the souls of ancient farmers who never left their land. They watched over you, guiding your hands as you worked in the dark. You're not sure if you believe the tale, but it certainly adds to the magic of the moment. In the distance, you hear a group of children singing a lullaby, their voices rising like a soft breeze on the water. At some point, you notice that you've worked through the evening's tasks without even thinking about it. The squash is harvested, the weeds pulled, and the night has slipped by unnoticed. The moon is now high in the sky, casting a silver sheen over the canals. The fireflies are still dancing, but the night is quieting down. As you paddle back to your corner of the Chinampa, you reflect on the day. The work is tough, yes, but it's rewarding in a way that's hard to explain. It's in the rhythm of your movements, the connection to the earth, the satisfaction of a well-tended patch of land. You wonder if the first Chinamperos felt this same quiet joy all those years ago. You dock your canoe and tie it off. The soft sounds of the water are the last thing you hear before heading back to the small shelter you've made on the edge of your Chinampa. It's not much, just a little structure with woven walls and a roof of palm fronds, but it's enough. The evening is quiet now, the air cool, the night still. You curl up on your woven mat, close your eyes, and listen to the gentle sway of the water below. Tomorrow, the work will begin again, but for now, all is well. The next morning greets you with the soft chirp of birds and the familiar scent of fresh earth. The sun peeks over the horizon, casting a golden glow that warms the water and the reeds. The tranquil calm that envelops you this early in the day is your favorite time. The world still feels like it belongs only to you and the land. However, the serenity is short-lived. There's always work to do. As you paddle out from your shelter, you notice something that makes your heart drop into your stomach. A section of your chinampa is sagging, just a little too much to be normal. It's barely noticeable at first, but the more you look, the more you realize it's sinking. One side of your floating island is slowly sinking into the water. This is the challenge every chinampero faces sooner or later, the delicate balance of earth and water. The whole system relies on the constant interplay of the lake's moisture and the mud of the chinampa. If your foundation becomes too saturated, or if erosion takes its toll, you risk losing your crops or, worse yet, your entire plot. You paddle over to the sinking section, checking the sides for cracks in the mud foundation. The earth feels solid enough, but there's a worrying softness to it now. It's almost as though the water is pushing upward, testing the boundaries of the soil you've worked so hard to maintain. Historically, this problem was not uncommon. The Aztecs had their own methods for stabilizing and repairing chinampas. One of their techniques involved reinforcing the edges with wooden stakes, driven deep into the lake bed to act as an anchor. Other chinamperos would plant dense vegetation, like reeds and cattails, along the borders to help bind the soil and reduce the effects of erosion. Of course, these methods were passed down through generations, their success determined by trial and error, and sometimes a little bit of magic. Some historians believe the use of ritual offerings might have played a role in chinampa upkeep. While it's hard to prove, there are records of offerings being made to the gods, including Tlaloc, the rain god, and Xochiquetzal, the goddess of flowers, asking for their protection and blessing over the harvest. Who knows? Maybe there's something to the idea that a spiritual blessing could stabilize a faltering plot. In fact, you wouldn't be entirely surprised if the odd moment of quiet reflection or a small offering of flowers or incense might do wonders for your garden's stability. But right now, there's no time for rituals. You have a sinking chinampa to repair. You reach for a spare bundle of reeds, a few extra wooden stakes, and set about reinforcing the edges. It's a slow process, but each stake driven into the earth brings a sense of accomplishment. The sinking begins to slow, and your chinampa feels more stable. It's not perfect yet, but you know the worst of it has passed. While you work, the sun climbs higher, and the rest of your fellow chinamperos start to stir. You hear the sound of paddles slapping against water as others head out to their own plots. A few exchange nods with you as they pass by. Everyone has their own battles to fight today, but the communal understanding is clear. We're all in this together. If your chinampa sinks, so could theirs. You share the responsibility of this delicate ecosystem. Once the worst of the repairs are done, you take a step back and admire your work. The earth feels more solid now, more secure. The patch that was once sagging is now as it should be, buoyant and steady. For a moment, you allow yourself a rare moment of peace, soaking in the feeling of accomplishment that comes after a tough morning's labor. It's hard to explain to outsiders, but there's something deeply satisfying about watching your farm come back to life after a crisis like this. It's like the land and water are in conversation with you, responding to your efforts. As you finish the final repairs, you can't help but smile. This is what it means to be a chinampero. Constantly adapting, constantly learning, constantly reshaping the world around you. As the day stretches on, the work continues. You tend to the crops, check the waterways for any signs of obstruction, and manage the delicate dance of water control. You're proud of what you've built here, but you know you can't rest for long. Nature waits for no one, but for now you sit for a moment, sipping from a gourd filled with cool water and allowing yourself a brief respite. The sun is high, the work is steady, and though the dangers of erosion and flooding are never far from your mind, you know you've done everything you can to protect this patch of land. You lean forward, inspecting the strange roots closely. Could this be something that could help the Chinampa soil become richer, more fertile? Some ancient texts do mention mysterious plants that were used by the Aztecs in agriculture, but whether or not those claims were true remains a matter of scholarly debate. Some historians believe that certain water plants were considered sacred, revered by the people as gifts from the gods. Could these roots be part of that legacy? The idea of a plant so powerful it could improve the fertility of the Chinampa, helping crops to grow better and faster, is enticing. But there's also a lingering sense of caution. The last thing you want is to disturb something that might have been placed there by the gods for reasons unknown to you. Historians are divided on the use of mystical plants in ancient Aztec agriculture. Some scholars think the plants in question were symbolic, intended to represent the link between nature and the divine. Others argue that the Aztecs did indeed use certain plants with unique properties, although the exact nature of these plants is still unclear. The truth lies somewhere in between. Plants and crops have always held symbolic and practical significance, with the same plants often being revered for their spiritual power as well as their agricultural benefits. You sit in silence for a moment, both of you staring at the glowing roots beneath the water. The pull of this discovery is strong, but the wisdom of ancient farmers whispers to you in the back of your mind, don't rush. Respect the land and it will respect you in turn. After a moment, you both agree to leave the area undisturbed for the time being. Whatever this plant is, you both know that taking hasty action could lead to unforeseen consequences. You'll return later, maybe when the time is right, to learn more. As you paddle back toward your own Chinampa, you feel the weight of the night settling in once again. The discovery has left you with more questions than answers, but you also feel a deeper sense of connection to the mysteries of the land. The water continues its endless rippling motion, and for the first time today, you allow yourself to relax, leaning back and letting the gentle rocking of your canoe lull you toward sleep. This life on the floating gardens is full of surprises, small and large, and the thought that there's so much more to discover beneath the surface, whether it's in the land or the traditions passed down through generations, fills you with quiet excitement. As the stars begin to glow brighter and the moon's reflection shimmers across the water, you feel a deep sense of peace settle over you. The day is done. The land, the water, and everything in between are at rest. The night stretches out, an endless canvas of stars above, the peaceful glow of moonlight bathing the Chinampa in a soft, silvery light. With the last of the day's work behind you, you feel an overwhelming sense of calm. The whispers of the world around you, the water, the distant calls of night creatures, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, seem to beckon you toward rest. Yet even as you feel the weight of exhaustion settling into your bones, there's something else that lingers. A question, a curiosity. That glowing root you saw earlier? It sticks with you. The strange light from beneath the water, the sensation that it could be something ancient, something forgotten. You can't shake the feeling that it's somehow tied to the essence of this land, to the spirit of the Chinampa itself. As much as you try to ignore it, the mystery gnaws at you. You're lying on your bed of woven reeds, wrapped in the familiar comfort of your cloak. The evening is peaceful, yet your mind is far from still. There's a soft crackling sound as the reeds shift under your weight, and the cool air brushes your skin in a tender caress. You close your eyes, but the image of that glowing root, twisted and luminous beneath the water's surface, remains sharp in your mind. Could it be something more than just an oddity of nature? Could it really have the power to change the very soil that supports your crops? As you drift in and out of thought, the distant sounds of the city begin to fade into the background, the faint hum of Tenochtitlan growing quieter as the night deepens. The city feels farther away now, as though the lake has created its own world. A world where only the water, the plants, and the people who tend them exist. The feeling is soothing, almost like you're part of something bigger, something older. You're a thread in a vast, interconnected tapestry that stretches across time. It's an odd thought to entertain, but there's something comforting about it. The idea that you're not just maintaining a piece of land, but you're part of something eternal, something that's existed for generations. It makes the work feel more meaningful. The Chinampa isn't just a method of agriculture. It's a living, breathing entity, something that has been shaped by time, by people, and by nature itself. As you relax into the soft embrace of the night, you start to think about the stories you've heard about ancient farmers, about the way they lived their lives in harmony with the land. You wonder if they too had moments like this, times when they felt that sense of connection to something beyond themselves. Maybe they too lay under the stars, listening to the water and the wind, feeling the pull of nature's rhythm. It's easy to get lost in the noise of the world, the bustle of the city, the clamor of modern life. But out here on the Chinampa, you have the luxury of listening. The rhythm of the land is slow, steady, and constant. There's comfort in that, in knowing that the world around you has been functioning like this for centuries. But it's not just the past that's woven into the fabric of this place. It's the future too. The crops you tend today will feed families for generations. The traditions you follow will be passed down. The Chinampa system, while ancient, is not just a relic of the past. It's a living tradition that will carry forward, sustained by the people who believe in it. You close your eyes again, allowing the calm of the night to wash over you. The sounds of the world continue to surround you, gentle and rhythmic. You breathe deeply, filling your lungs with the cool night air, and let your thoughts drift away. The mystery of the glowing root fades into the background, and you let the slow pull of sleep begin to take hold. Before you fully surrender to slumber, you feel the softest sense of reassurance. This life you lead, this quiet, simple existence, is part of something much larger. It's not just about growing crops or tending to the Chinampa. It's about continuing a legacy, a tradition that has been passed down through the ages, one generation after another. You're a part of it now, and for all its mysteries and challenges, it's a life you wouldn't trade for anything. As the sounds of the night continue their soothing chorus, you finally slip into the deep, peaceful rest that only the land and the water can provide. Tomorrow will come, with its own work, its own challenges. But for now, there is only the quiet, undisturbed flow of the water and the steady, rhythmic beating of the land. As the hours slip by, the world outside your Chinampa falls further into the quiet embrace of night. The lake is still, the water reflecting the stars with perfect clarity, as though the heavens themselves are mirrored in the gentle surface below. The soft sounds of nocturnal creatures, crickets chirping, distant calls of waterfowl, mingle with the occasional rustling of the reeds. Everything around you feels endless, peaceful, a slow-motion orchestra of nature that lulls you deeper into the rhythm of the earth. But even as you lie there drifting between sleep and wakefulness, there's something slightly different tonight. A feeling, almost a whisper, stirs in the back of your mind. A subtle recognition that you're connected to something far older than you can comprehend. It's as if the land itself is holding its breath, waiting for something. And then, as if answering this unspoken feeling, you hear it. The faintest splash in the distance. A sound so quiet and soft that you almost think it's your imagination. But no, it's real. There it is again. The sound of something small breaking the water's surface. It's gentle, almost playful, like the ripple of a stone skipping across the lake. You sit up slightly, straining your ears to catch the sound again. There it is, a faint rustle, then silence. You glance toward the shore, your eyes scanning the dark expanse of water and reeds. Could it be one of the many creatures that call this place home? A curious fish? A turtle gliding across the surface? It's hard to say in the near-complete darkness. but the sensation it gives you is unmistakable. The world around you is full of hidden life, of secrets waiting to be discovered. And yet, as you strain your eyes and ears for more information, it's just as quickly gone. Silence returns, wrapping itself around you once more like a blanket. And somewhere in the distance, you hear the faintest echo of a child's laughter, a reminder that, despite all the challenges, life on the Chinampa goes on. The plants grow, the people work, and the water hums its steady rhythm beneath it all. The afternoon carries on, a lazy stretch of time that slowly melts into evening. The sun, now starting its descent, paints the sky with hues of orange and pink, casting a soft glow over the water. The air is cooler now, and the warm breeze carries the faint scent of blooming flowers mixed with the earthy freshness of the lake. You're content for a moment, watching the way the ripples catch the light. The day has been full of hard work, but there's something satisfying about watching your Chinampa steady itself after the morning's troubles. However, there's one more thing to tend to before the day is truly done. You paddle toward the center of your plot, where a handful of saplings are growing. They're delicate, still young, but they show promise. These are the trees that will one day help balance the ecosystem of your Chinampa, providing shade and further stabilizing the soil. But at this early stage, they need constant attention. You know that in these final hours of daylight, they'll be especially vulnerable. This is the time when predators, both animal and human, tend to come out. You've heard the stories from older Chinamperos about the dangers of wildlife, particularly the sudden visits from water birds who have a taste for young plants. The sharp, fast beaks of these birds can destroy a season's worth of work in a single morning. It's not just birds, though. In the city, there are always rumors of people from neighboring farms, sometimes in desperate need, plucking fruits and vegetables from unattended Chinampas. Your strategy is simple: early evening patrols. You make your rounds just as the day begins to blur into night, keeping an eye on both your crops and the water around you. While the sight of a bird swooping low over your plants isn't unfamiliar, it's a reminder that the city is never truly far away. There's a delicate balance between ensuring your crops thrive and keeping an eye out for any potential threats. Historians often note how urban life in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan created a strange divide between rural and urban populations. The city's wealth and population growth often meant that more and more people relied on the Chinampa system for their food, but it also brought with it a subtle level of tension. Was there a kind of unspoken agreement between the people of the city and those who farmed on the Chinampas, or did it often lead to tensions? Some scholars argue that this urban-rural dynamic helped shape the social fabric of the Aztec society in ways that we're only beginning to understand. For you, the reality is clear. While the city might feel a little distant, it's always lurking at the edge of the horizon. Every evening, you take your role as protector of the Chinampa seriously. You're not just guarding plants, you're safeguarding the lifeblood of this way of life, a life that connects you to a deep tradition of farming, passed down through countless generations. As the sun dips further and the stars start to emerge, you notice something peculiar. A faint, almost glowing light in the distance. For a moment, you think it might be one of those fireflies again, those mysterious creatures that always seem to give you a sense of reassurance in the darkness. But this light is different, brighter, more deliberate. You paddle toward the glow, curiosity piqued. It's not the moon's reflection on the water, and it's certainly not the stars. As you get closer, you realize it's the light from a distant boat, a small canoe, carrying a figure who's paddling in the quiet, serene way that can only come from a fellow Chinampero. There's no rush in their movement, no urgency. It's the same feeling you get when you're out on the water late at night, working in the stillness of the world. This stranger doesn't seem to notice you as you approach. You pause for a moment, observing them from a distance, wondering what brings them out here so late. Maybe they're just working like you. but there's something about the way they move, slow, purposeful, that suggests they're not just tending to crops. As you draw nearer, you hear the soft murmur of their voice, chanting under their breath, as if speaking to the water itself. Could they be praying? It's an odd, but not entirely unfamiliar sight. You've heard that some chinamperos use rituals and chants, especially during the evenings when the work feels more spiritual than practical. Sefat. It's said that these offerings, these small prayers, can ensure a good harvest or protect the crops from unseen dangers. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were, especially given that we don't have concrete records of daily life for the average chinampero. There's a theory that while the nobility might have engaged in grand religious ceremonies, the common farmers worked their land with quieter, more personal rituals. Maybe this silent chant is one of them. The figure in the canoe doesn't see you watching, so you continue your patrol, giving them space. You move past, quietly checking on your crops and ensuring everything is in order. But the image of that lone figure paddling into the night sticks with you. There's something humbling about it. The way their work seems to transcend just survival and becomes an offering to the forces that guide this land. As you finish your rounds and prepare to head back to your shelter, you feel a sense of calm wash over you. The work of the day is done, the crops are safe, and the night stretches out before you, peaceful and quiet. The water ripples gently against the shore, and you can hear the soft sounds of nature settling in for the night. It's a feeling you know well, contentment in the balance of things. Now, as you sit by the edge of the water, the stars overhead, and the cool air brushing against your skin, you reflect on the quiet rhythm of this life. You might not always know exactly what the next day will bring, but you understand your place in the world. You're a part of a larger system, working in harmony with the land and the water. And for tonight, that's enough. The quiet of the evening deepens as the stars begin to twinkle above, the soft hum of the water lapping gently against the banks of the Chinampa, providing a steady, soothing rhythm. You're seated once more by the edge of your floating island, contemplating the day's work. The gentle breeze carries with it the lingering fragrance of blooming flowers and damp earth. But it's not just the physical environment that fills your senses. There's a hum of energy that pulses beneath the surface, a quiet pulse of life that reverberates through your bones. It's a rhythm that stretches across time, one that connects you to the ancient farmers who built this system and worked these lands long before you. Tonight, there's a subtle shift in the air. The warmth of the day has faded, replaced by a chill that signals the onset of nightfall. You pull your cloak a little tighter around your shoulders, the woven fabric offering a comforting sense of security. As you do, your eyes are drawn to the water's edge, where tiny ripples break the stillness, creating a soft, shimmering pattern in the moonlight. You wonder how many other chinamperos, all across the lake, are experiencing the same sense of peace and connection to the land. But the tranquility of the moment is fleeting. You hear the unmistakable sound of someone approaching, paddling steadily through the water, their canoe gliding toward you like a shadow in the dim light. You can't quite see their face yet, but you already know who it is, your neighbor from the adjacent Chinampa, the one who's always keen to share a story or lend a hand when needed. As they draw closer, they greet you with a friendly nod, and you return the gesture, both of you taking a moment to appreciate the stillness before speaking. They seem more energetic than usual, their eyes sparkling with a gleam of excitement. "I found something," they say in a quiet voice, as if the discovery is something both thrilling and secret. "Come, see for yourself." You paddle alongside them, curiosity piqued. It's a rare occasion when someone on the Chinampas discovers something truly unique, something worth sharing. They steer their canoe toward a secluded section of the lake, where the water is particularly clear and still, as though holding its breath. When you arrive, they point to a patch of water lilies blooming in the moonlight, their delicate white petals opening wide against the night. But it's not the lilies that have caught their attention. It's the roots beneath the surface. What you see doesn't look entirely ordinary. The roots seem to be twisting and growing in a dense, tangled mass. They're different from the usual aquatic plants, with a glossy, almost luminescent sheen. The roots have a subtle glow to them, reflecting the moonlight in a way that feels otherworldly. You're taken aback, unsure of what to make of it. What is it, you ask? Don't know yet, your neighbor replies, their voice a mix of awe and caution. But I think it might be something valuable, maybe even something to help us with the soil. The old texts say something about mystical plants that grow only in certain conditions, and this looks like one of them. The moment passes, but it leaves behind a curious sense of wonder. There are things here in this lake, in this world of chinampas, that you may never fully understand. Mysteries, both small and grand, that have been passed down through generations, hidden just beneath the surface. It reminds you of that glowing root from earlier, the one you and your neighbor saw. You can't shake the feeling that it was more than just a peculiar plant. It's a symbol of something larger, something that ties the people, the land, and the very water itself together in ways that defy understanding. But that's part of the beauty of this life, isn't it? It's not about having all the answers. It's about the journey, about the quiet moments spent wondering and discovering. The mysteries you uncover today might lead to new ones tomorrow. And that's the cycle that keeps everything turning, like the steady rotation of the earth itself. As the night deepens and the stillness wraps tighter around your chinampa, you allow your thoughts to wander. The work of the day is done. The crops are tended to, the chinampa carefully maintained, and the world outside feels far removed from the slow, deliberate pace of this life. You let go of any lingering thoughts, and finally, let your body sink back into the soft reeds beneath you. The stars overhead twinkle, seemingly endless, casting their dim glow over the water. The peaceful rhythm of the world continues its slow, mesmerizing dance. You breathe in deeply, filling your lungs with the cool night air, the fragrance of damp earth, the whisper of the water. There's no rush, there's no urgency here, just the steady pulse of life and the quiet reassurance that you are part of something eternal. As your mind begins to drift, the soft sounds of the night become the soundtrack to your descent into deep, restful sleep. You can feel the weight of your eyelids growing heavier with each breath, and the comforting embrace of slumber begins to pull you in, deeper and deeper. The mysteries of the floating gardens, of the lake, and of the glowing root beneath the surface, all of it fades away as you give yourself over to the quiet peace of the night. Tomorrow, the chinampa will be waiting, and with it, the steady rhythm of life will continue. But for now, there's only the stars, the water, and the gentle, soothing rhythm of the earth beneath you. Sleep well, for you are not alone in this quiet world. The land and water will hold you safe until the morning light.